he didn't know where else to turn. He confessed to Jason that he had begun using drugs and gotten mixed up in some criminal activity, and there's some dangerous people out there that he was sort of running with, and now his concern was some of those dangerous people were coming to get him, and so he literally felt like his life was in danger. Now, when Jason heard this, he was surprised, but at the same time, he could tell that David was being very authentic and just needed help, and Jason felt like, his job ultimately was to serve God and all of God's people. And David was one of those people, and he was in need of help. And so if all Jason did was simply provided safe haven for David inside of this motel room, then that was serving God, and it was the right thing to do. And so Jason immediately said, "No problem, David." He handed him a Bible and said, "Come on in." David took the Bible awkwardly and just kind of stood there for a moment, not really sure what to do. But then Jason said, "Hey, relax, just come inside, take a seat." And so David did. He walked in, he sat down with the Bible, and then Jason actually came over and sat down next to him. And the two of them, for about 15 minutes, just made kind of awkward small talk. Jason could tell, David is completely on edge. He was staring at the door, which was now closed. He just clearly was very anxious and paranoid, and so Jason really wasn't talking about the Bible or God or anything. He was just, trying to calm David down and show him that this was a safe place. And then after about 15 minutes of this, when David had somewhat calmed down, and also by this point, nobody else had showed up for this Bible study group, Jason decided, okay, you know what, maybe I'll just begin the Bible study with David. It kind of gives us something to do. And so Jason got up, he locked the door, showing David that it's just gonna be them, it's safe here. He told David to go ahead and open his Bible to a certain page, and then the two of them just began reading the Bible together. And for hours, they just sat there reading the Bible, and Jason spoke to David about, teachings of God and how to lead your life in a way to serve other people. And, for the most part, David did completely calm down and seemed to really be embracing this Bible study. But eventually, despite how well this Bible study was going, it did need to come to an end at some point, at least in Jason's mind. When he began to notice it was getting dark outside, he sort of began wrapping it up, and he shut his Bible and sort of expected that David would take a hint and leave, but David didn't. Instead, when David began to realize that, hey, this is over now and it's time for you to go, David looked at Jason and begged him to please let him stay in this room overnight, that he can't go out there, it's not safe for him. Now, Jason knew he did have some level of responsibility for David. I mean, David had told him he was in danger, he had already invited him inside, and was basically providing safe haven for him, and it did feel kind of wrong to be like, now go back out there, but at the same time, Jason felt a little uneasy. I mean, he didn't really know David. He didn't really understand the situation. And so there was some hesitation at first, but after looking again at David and seeing how desperate he was to just please stay here overnight, Jason said, okay, you can stay. So Jason grabbed some extra blankets and pillows and created a makeshift bed on the floor. And then after that, the two of them actually reopened their Bibles and just began reading some more from the Bible for a couple more hours. Basically another round of Bible study. But eventually, they both were very tired, so they put their Bibles down, they said goodnight, they each climbed into their beds, closed their eyes, and fell asleep. For the next 5 days, Jason's motel room remained mostly closed. And the only thing anybody heard coming from his room was gospel music. It was being played at a very high volume, basically the entire time, to the point where other residents of this motel began to complain about how loud the music was. However, the owner of the motel was getting these complaints from residents who were only there for, hours at a time or days at a time. And, the room they're complaining about, Jason's room, he was a long-term resident and so had a sort of higher priority with the owner. And so the owner just didn't feel like bothering Jason. He wanted him to stay and keep paying for that room. So the owner didn't do anything about the noise complaints. And also, the owner did know that his motel had sort of a seedy reputation. So generally speaking, he didn't really care too much about the music to begin with. And so over the course of these 5 days, music kept on blasting, and really the only other thing of note, again, that happened in this period of time, was that these two other people entered Jason's motel room and didn't leave either. So basically there's 4 people in the room, they haven't come out again, super loud music, that's all going on for 5 days. And then on the 5th day, the morning of September 22nd, a single person walked out of Jason's motel room, and they were wearing a full-body hazmat suit and carrying some sort of luggage. And they would leave the motel, get in a car, and drive away. 45 minutes later, about 25 miles away from that motel, the Fort Worth Fire Department had a call about this raging dumpster fire in a residential neighborhood. Firefighters quickly got to the scene and put out the blaze, and after it was gone, they walked up to the smoky dumpster and looked inside just to get a look at what was burning, and what they saw caused them all to back up and call the police. It would turn out David was right when he said he was in danger. However, what he didn't understand is hiding out in Jason's motel room was not going to protect him from that danger. Shortly after he and Jason wrapped up that second Bible study that night, and the two of them climbed into their respective beds, Jason in his actual bed and David in the makeshift bed on the floor, well, David did fall asleep pretty quickly, but Jason didn't. Jason waited until David was asleep, and then Jason got up, got a knife, and then slit David's throat. Then he cut David's heart out and ate it, because Jason the preacher really actually believed that human sacrifice was the best and purest way to serve God. Over the course of the next 5 days after killing David, Jason would remain in his motel room blasting gospel music, and over those 5 days, he would basically lure those two women into his room, very likely on the promise of Bible study, but they too would be sacrificed. And then on the 5th day, the person who exited the motel room in the full hazmat suit was Jason, and that luggage he was carrying with him contained the body parts of the 3 people he had just killed. And he brought those body parts to that dumpster in that residential neighborhood and lit them on fire. And so when the firefighters put out the fire, what they saw inside were burned up bodies. Jason was arrested, and while he was awaiting trial, he confessed that David and the 2 women were not actually his first victims. He said that just a few years earlier, he had sacrificed his girlfriend, and that house fire that destroyed all of his belongings and prompted him to go live in this motel was set by Jason himself, because he had sacrificed his roommate and needed to get rid of the evidence. Ultimately, law enforcement was only able to show that Jason killed those 5 people. But there could have been more. Jason was found guilty of capital murder and sentenced to death. He is currently on death row in Texas. On the evening of Thursday, May 21st, 2015, a 16-year-old girl named Lily walked into the home gym inside of her house in Hong Kong looking to do a workout. Now, she sort of expected the gym would be empty and she could kind of have the run of the place, but as soon as she walked in, she saw her dad was in there and he was doing some sort of cool down exercise on a yoga ball. So Lily's dad, whose name was Ka Kim Sun, was a doctor and a professional, and normally at this time of the day, she would never see him in the gym. He was typically locked upstairs in his study, or upstairs doing work or something, or he was just gone for the day. So for him to be here, it just didn't really line up with his schedule. And so Lily asked her dad, what are you doing here? What's going on? And her dad would tell her, well, actually, work at the hospital was really slow today, so I took off, I played some tennis with friends, and now I'm just doing some cool down exercises because I got nothing else to do. But I'll be out of your hair in a second. And sure enough, a couple minutes later, her dad was up, out of the gym, and Lily just began her workout. The next day, May 22nd, around 1 o'clock, Lily was at home at her dining room table, sitting across from her mother, whose name was Wong Siu Fing, and Lily was eating a snack and staring at an open textbook. Now, normally at 1 o'clock on a Friday, Lily would be at school, but she had had the day off that day. And she had wanted to spend her day off seeing friends and just being a teenager, but her dad was really focused on her being successful academically, and he told her that absolutely not. You're not going anywhere. You are gonna stay home and you are gonna study all day long. You will not leave the house. That's what you're doing. So Lily just continued to stare at the textbook and basically do what her father said. And then a couple of minutes later, she actually heard her dad coming down the stairs, and he came into the dining room, and he was clearly very pleased to see his daughter doing her work, or at least appearing to do her work. And he came over to her, gave her a kiss, he kissed their mother, and then he said he was off to work. And then he went out the door, and he was gone. And as soon as Carl was gone, Lily's mom looked over at her and said, I'm not gonna make you study all day. Come on, let's go out and have a mother-daughter shopping. And Lily was stoked. She shut her textbook, she went and got ready, and then a minute later, she and her mom climbed into her mom's yellow Mini Cooper car, and they headed out. About 2 hours later, around 4:15 p.m., a local jogger was running in the same neighborhood as where Lily and her family lived, and as they were running down the road, they noticed there was this yellow Mini Cooper car sitting on the side of the road, not moving, but it was still on. It was just sort of idling right there. And at first glance, it appeared there were people inside the car. but they weren't doing anything. They were just sitting there, not moving. And so the jogger was curious, and so they ran past and made a point to look inside the car, and they saw 2 women in the front 2 seats of this car slumped over. The 2 women were Lily and her mother. And so the jogger began to panic and banged on the glass to try to get the women to respond, but they didn't. And so a minute later, police were called. They dragged Lily and her mother out of the car. They were totally unresponsive. They rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. They both died. The police would begin their investigation into their deaths by searching the yellow Mini Cooper car. And when they searched it, there really was nothing of note inside of it. I mean, the 2 women's purses were in the front of the car, there was some basic exercise equipment in the trunk, but the car was pristine, clean, not cluttered. I mean, there really was nothing in the car that gave away what could have happened to these 2 women. For the next 6 months, the police tirelessly looked for some lead as to what happened to this mother and daughter. They would interview all their friends and family. They would search the house top to bottom. They would basically take apart this Mini Cooper and look for, defects or flaws that maybe could have contributed to their death. I mean, they were looking everywhere, but it just didn't make sense. Nobody had any idea what happened to those 2 women. And so right as this case appeared like it was about to go cold, the detectives decided to just go back to the Mini Cooper and see if maybe, just maybe, they missed something. And sure enough, they had. It would turn out on May 22nd, 2015, the day that Lily and her mother died, Lily's father had told Lily to stay